he has the same heart, that person has the same eyes, that person has the same feelings that run through us. So it gets very toxic, and like it gets from not motivating to just disheartening, where you just keep losing kind of a focus in the game. And when I'm watching the game, one of the main things as a therapist that I'm trying to see is, like, how what confidence level every player is on. It's pretty evident Maguire's confidence level in a United shirt, because he genuinely looks shaky the last 3 4 months. And in that zone, when you're playing football and you know that, oh, one wrong touch of my from my leg might, like, lead up to all these trolls, you start focusing more on those trolls than the game. And then when you do that, that leads up to those mishaps, that lead up to other people who are watching up the game be like, there's a clear pass right there, bud. Why are you not passing him that ball?
Jadon's my favorite player, and I want him to also know that he has a lot of fans around the world that really like love and support him, and will support him no matter what, and that we're all behind his back all the time.
Hi, today I'm joined by Zee, a mental health therapist from Colorado. I met Zee at the Manchester United Supporters Convention in Las Vegas. Good to see you again, Zee. Now, Manchester United players, an increasing number are suffering mental health challenges in recent times. I'd like to start off by asking you about Jadon Sancho and what you think of his situation.
Thank you for having me on your show, John. Thank you so much. First of all, I would say that it's a little difficult to comment on this situation because we don't know exactly what's happening behind the scenes. But we can read into whatever, like, has been presented over to us. And I personally, being a mental health therapist and, like, been looking at this situation closely, I feel like Ten Hag really managed the situation really well. And I'm talking about not now, but basically last year when uh, Jaden was dropped from the squad for concerns that he was struggling with. So I feel like he handled really well up in that situation. In this situation, probably when the interview was going on, when he was in the press conference, I also feel he answered that question well too. Again, in my opinion, because he was asked about it, and as a manager, you either give your honest reflection or you spin the question, kind of a thing. And he chose to give an honest reflection on what it was. um, but the reaction that like Jaden put out there, in my opinion, was probably a little bit too hard. I think it could have been a lot better. It could have been a lot more smoother. He probably couldn't have used some of the words like scapegoat, because personally, being a United fan, I feel like he has received a lot of love from the United fan base as a whole. A lot of United fans have wanted to see him on the pitch, and probably, like me, I personally feel how he might be feeling, because I think he would have been a better choice option up front for us this season when Hoyland was out. But it's all about, like, managing the situation better, and I feel like the situation was not handled well by Jaden or his team.
So, as a mental health therapist, if you were working directly with Jadon Sancho, how do you think you could help him?
I feel like a lot of help has to come from the player or the individual within. I'm a mental health therapist. I provide therapy services to individuals here in Colorado, and a lot of times what I tell them to do is to find the power within themselves, to empower themselves, kind of a thing. And most importantly, not take decisions when you have a slightly hot mind or when you are upset about something, to reflect about it, to talk about it, to surround yourself with individuals who are not just yes man kind of a thing, but who genuinely want good for you, and, like, want good for what your future looks like. And in this situation, I would have particularly told him, or, like, advised him. But again, he's much more successful than us. But the advice that I would have given up to him would have been, think about it for 6 hours, 12 hours, and then put out the statement that you are thinking to put out. Because in that statement, you are challenging the most authoritative figure in the club, the manager. And if you're doing so, you really have to have a strong backing case. You can't just put out a statement saying that, you can't put out a statement in the public and letting the public know that there's a lot going on behind the scenes. well, if there is a lot going on behind the scene, then what is going on behind the scene? Because if you don't mention or describe it, which again, it's your decision not to do so, you're just leaving a Pandora box opened up for people to speculate, for people to come up with stories, for people to come up with endings of what your thing might be, and from there it just becomes messy. So, uh, in my opinion, it should have been handled well. The statement should have gone out as fast as it did. Could have thought about it more. Statement, in my personal opinion, shouldn't have been public in the first place. Should have been communicated well within the management and within the team, because I'm a very creative person, so I'm all for individual freedom. I want individual freedom in the things that I make, that I create. But football is a team sport, and in a team sport, you have to think about how it's going to affect your team. And if your team has lost a game, you really have to, think twice before you put something that could further damage them. So it would have been probably more about asking him and communicating him on if he really wants to do this, or if this thing can wait for 5 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, kind of a thing, or if there could be any other way this could have been approached.
So, as you say, then, more questions and answers from the statement by Jadon Sancho. You're looking at this as a fan as well as a mental health therapist. Do you believe there's a way back for Jadon?
I genuinely hope so. I really hope so, because he's a player that I literally prayed for years for us to sign, because his saga dragged on for far too long. But again, that's not onto him. That's onto how we are run as a football club. And I have a lot of disagreements on how we are run as a football club. But I was really excited when we signed him. I'm a very strong believer in one thing, and that is that your talent never goes to waste. But what really happens with your talent is that it's not nourished well if it's not surrounded with the proper surroundings or the environment it's needed to nourish itself. He was getting that nourishment, or he was getting that support, probably somewhere in Dortmund, and he was excelling and doing the best that he was doing up over there. We all saw the numbers that he was reaching. He was matching the numbers of Lionel Messi at that time, which was exceptional. But over here, for him to come back into this team, he really has to make amends with the manager first of all, then with the fans, and then with the players, and then with the fans. I would say the fans are the easiest to convince. We all love him. A big fan base of a crowd loves him. There are toxic fan base on Twitter and on other platforms that that are just toxic, but they're toxic towards everyone, and or any other player that plays or doesn't score or doesn't assist or misplaces a single pass, kind of a thing. So to ignore that negative noise, but to work for people who really genuinely care for your mission or care for the club, which is the manager and which is the players. So I hope that there is a public apology, kind of a thing, to put things to bed. But I genuinely hope that he works out. And but for that, again, it is a stand that he has to take himself as a person. I feel like it does not have to come from Ten Hag, but again, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. But he really has to step up himself and take responsibility, take accountability, and then come back and then prove all his fans right that he is such a goddamn good talent, but something's just not fitting up right, and that's something that he needs to figure it out. And the team and the club has to support him in that. But on while saying so, I'll also completely understand if Ten Hag benches him out for the rest of the season, or for the till December, and then he moves to a different club, because a manager should always have control and authority over the football club, and that is something that I feel like as a football club we have lacked in the past, with the Pogba situation, with the Lingard situation, where we let certain players be bigger than the club or be bigger than the manager. And I don't think we should let that happen again. But again, for that not to happen, Jaden has to take a lot of accountability, in my opinion.
As you say, toxicity is a problem these days on many levels with our football club and all football clubs. But there's still a lot of love for Jadon Sancho. And tell me about your co-founder, because I know she's a big fan of Jadon Sancho.
Yeah, and my co-founder Naomi, who I founded my startup with, Rozarte, which is basically working around on how to utilize or how to empower people by highlighting and advocating for mental health issues and building communities for people. So Naomi is one of the biggest Jaden fans that I know. Her entire life revolves around him, and similarly to her, there are a lot of other fans that whose life revolves around United players, because they really inspire and they really affect us in different ways. Like for me, my biggest inspiration, I would say, was Paul Scholes and the way he handled himself, the way he stayed grounded, the way he's still grounded. Just a couple of days ago, I was looking at his interview where he said that probably Gerrard could have done what he in United what he did. I disagree. I don't think anyone could have done what Scholesy did, but that's his character, that's his humbleness, kind of a thing. So we get attracted to people that we look up to or that seem similar to us. And I feel like Naomi has the similar age bracket as Jaden, similar astrological signs as Jaden. So there's a lot of connection between up there, and she's a big fan. She's really upset these past few days because she really fears that, it might not end well, and it might be a loss for her because her life literally revolves around him and United.
As I mentioned earlier, I met both you and Naomi at the Manchester United Supporters Convention, UnitedCon in Las Vegas. Let's hear a little bit of the interview I did with Naomi in Las Vegas.
Hi, my name is Naomi. I'm here with my company, Rozarte. Rozarte is a mental wellness company founded in Colorado. And we're here with our Mentally United campaign, which highlights the journeys of individuals and how Man United and soccer help empower their mental wellness journey, as well as help them build their communities. This is a special shirt that I made for Jadon Sancho, and hopefully I get to pass it to him during the Sunday game. It has some special moments from his past season all over it, and I handmade it, so I hope he likes it. Jadon's my favorite player, and ever since almost before he came to Man United, I've been following his journey. He's exactly my age, so I've looked up to him as an inspiration, and I'm his biggest fan. So I put together some of the special moments from this season, and maybe some things he'll notice that are personal to him and put them all over the shirt. And I want him to also know that he has a lot of fans around the world that really love and support him, and will support him no matter what, and that we're all behind his back all the time.
So as we saw there, Naomi really is a big fan of Jadon Sancho, and I hope for her sake that Jadon does make an apology and comes back to play for Manchester United. And as you mentioned there, she wanted to give that shirt to Jadon at the game, did she? Was she successful?
Oh no, we were unsuccessful in doing that because the security was too tight, and the access to the players was quite difficult up over there. So that was a mishap. But I genuinely hope he stays up with us because we plan on attending the next preseason. So if he is there at that time, we'll definitely try and connect up with him there and give him the gift there.
I hope so. When you're watching our football players, obviously at the moment we seem to be a little bit like a soap opera with so many problems all the time. Are you looking at, as a fan, not just as a fan, but you're thinking, what are the mental problems that some of these guys might have? Because we live in a goldfish bowl these days with social media, and the players do come under so much pressure with the trolling and the comments that we get on social media. How difficult do you think it is for these star players to cope with all that?
I think it's very, very difficult, to be very honest with you, especially to read what everyone is saying about you, and especially if it's negative comments, kind of a thing. Because as a player, you really want to give yourself, you really want to be the best version of the player you are on the field. But when you are greeted up with trolls, it doesn't motivate you further, it degrades you more. And at times, us fans have to really realize that someone who's sitting right across the screen or who might be reading this is just a human being like us. Probably not an average human being like us, probably a more entitled or probably a more, I would say, well off human being. But he has the same heart, that person has the same eyes, that person has the same feelings that run through us. So it gets very toxic, and it gets from not motivating to just disheartening, where you just keep losing kind of a focus in the game. And when I'm watching the game, one of the main things as a therapist that I'm trying to see is how what confidence level every player is on. It's pretty evident Maguire's confidence level in a United shirt, because he genuinely looks shaky the last 3-4 months, and that has nothing to do with Maguire. I mean, it has to do with him, but it also has to do with the feedback that he's been receiving, with the game time that he's been receiving. And in that zone, when you're playing football and you know that, oh, one wrong touch of my from my leg might lead up to all these trolls, you start focusing more on those trolls than the game. And then when you do that, that leads up to those mishaps, that lead up to other people who are watching up the game be like, there's a clear pass right there, but why are you not passing him that ball? Because in the game, there are just so many things happening up in your mind. So it really takes up a big toll. And I genuinely hope and I genuinely pray that as time goes on, clubs and players both start utilizing and start valuing mental health more. In my opinion, mental health is as important as physical health. If God forbid, Jaden would have damaged his ACL back in September and would have been out for a whole year, no one would have batted an eye, because that would have been a physical injury. So it would have been like, oh, yeah, kudos, like, well recovery and come back well, kind of a thing. But as it's something that we cannot see, as it's something that people cannot see, and it's not something that's happening up in front of our eyes, it's something that's happening in the brain, it becomes difficult to acknowledge that. But when you are a club like United, when you are a player who is probably so well paid, and even if salary is not a even if we negate the salary, even if you're someone in the public eye who has so much pressure around them and who has so many external energies around themselves, it really could get difficult. And in these cases, I feel like the clubs should support the players better in providing them with as good physical training as they're as good mental training as they're getting the physical training, kind of a thing, not negating on their mental health just because they have to meet up a certain amount of sprints or, like, exercises, because you really have to be in that game. For some players it's easy to intune yourself, just forget about something and just get into the game, but for some players it's difficult.
So clearly, these kind of modern pressures are not going to go away, and players just got to cope with the modern toxicity and the criticism that they're going to get from legacy media and social media. I'm guessing that you think there's a role for somebody like you. I know you're not auditioning for a job, but do you think how important is a role like yours at a football club like Manchester United?
I think it's extremely important and crucial, especially with the kinds of exterior pressures that players are going through aside from the football pitch itself. And I feel like just having systems of mental health therapists or mental health providers that are working with the youth system as well as the adult system, I feel like it really is beneficial. Like, for an instance, in Mason Greenwood's story, I feel like the club could have picked up on his red flags, because he was with the club from age of 7 or 8. I'm a mental health therapist working with kids aged from 5 to 12 because I provide therapy services at an elementary school, and it's pretty easy to pick up the red flags up over there, or even if it's not pretty easy, you can still make a sense of those things. And in my opinion, if Greenwood would have received early intervention, or if he would have received support from a mental health therapist at an earlier age, a lot of the things that he went through could have been negated. I'm not saying it would have never happened, but it could have been negated, and his foundations could have been much more stronger. He received the peak, he received the hype, he received everything at a very young and tender age, and then he was also struggling with those things from back then, in my opinion, because these are all patterns that you grow up as a child, and if these things are not handled well as a child, then these could grow up and blow up as they did, because then you don't know how to control your body dysregulation. That's the main thing that I work with kids these days, is body dysregulation, on how they can utilize their anger or their frustration or things that they're feeling depressed about, and express it out with sports or with other creative outlets, kind of a thing. I have kids tell me, 6 years old, 7 years old, Mr. Z, I don't know why I hit my older brother. Everything was just black in front of my eyes. Those are the things that they speak about when you provide them with a caring and nurturing atmosphere to do so. And I feel like clubs should have mental health departments, and those should not be just integrated into the first team or into the reserves team, but there should be a whole system, starting from the youth team, starting from the young boys that they get or young girls that they get, and providing them and finding them what things are they struggling with, knowing their families, what has been their background like, what could be some struggles that are untapped there, and then helping them grow and expand and excel. Because I feel like clubs, and I'm not saying United, but clubs in general, just treat their kids or just treat their youth players like robots and just want the most numbers or statistics out of them, and that pressurizes them and that negates the struggles that they might be going through. So there, we should all learn from our mistakes, kind of a thing. And I feel like this is a mistake that was made very heavily from Greenwood, but that was also partially, I feel like United was responsible for it, because they could have had the system, they have the funding, they have the they have the whole infrastructure for it. But I genuinely hope, and that they set up a system that runs smoothly so that we don't have to go through another incident like this. And I also hope and pray that, they are providing him and his family with the support and the need that they need right now, because although in a loan at Getafe, but being an employer of United, I feel like him, his wife, and their kid, they should be provided with the utmost amount of support that the club can do so, because he's still young, he can still grow, he can still learn from his mistakes, and should not be abandoned in that situation, but should be provided with good support.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that should be said is that playing for Manchester United is probably like no other club. There's so much attention on Manchester United on a daily basis. Whatever happens at Manchester United is global news. So it really is important. And it's only going to get more difficult, isn't it, with the attention on Manchester United, especially at the moment, because everything that happens at United is magnified because of the ongoing saga about whether or not the Glazers are going to sell the football club. And it all seems to contribute to, it's all part of the pressure, isn't it? So how important is it going forward that we really do take care of the players that we've got?
I think it's extremely crucial, but it won't get easy if we are still surrounded by by the noise of the sale, because that really is affecting on how we want to move forward in terms of as a club, and in terms of creating a more infrastructural needs that the club requires. But all these players, like I remember Gary Neville usually says this, that the single most important thing in football to do, or single most important job in football, is to be a United goalkeeper, because you make one mistake, you are crucified everywhere, on media, social media, traditional media, everywhere. Same thing goes for our strikers. If they don't have an assist coming up, if they don't have goals coming up, people negate their performances. What Antony has done, he hasn't gotten the numbers to back himself up, but his work rate and the work he's doing in the team, it's so damn good. He goes out for a couple of games and you see how dysfunctional a team becomes. So you really have to, fans really have to, it's a whole psychoeducation and awareness thing that fans should be made aware about, players should be made aware about, and the club should have infrastructures, knowing that if they are this big, then they should have the support systems for the players that come to them. Not everyone has the same character. Not everyone can be Casemiro, Roy Keane, Rio Ferdinand, Ronaldo. No, we will have players who would be struggling up over there, but we need individuals or support systems who could instill those factors or those characteristics that these lads had, or these players can learn and grow up from them, kind of a thing. So I really hope our club figures this out, because it's just become like a Kim Kardashian show at this stage, where we are hearing more claims coming out and more opinion pieces coming out than the performances that we are putting out there. So I really hope it works well, and it improves well in the future.
I only say it partly in jest, but it feels as a Manchester United fan that we probably need a bit of therapy as well at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely would say so, because it becomes emotionally draining for us too, just reading all this negative news coming in and then not knowing on how to process it. And same goes for, I feel like, in my personal opinion, every individual needs therapy, because there is so many things that are going up in your mind that you sometimes need someone to talk about. You need someone to reflect about, someone who can give you, who can give you an outer lens perspective rather than the perspective that's just been running around in your head constantly back and forth. So in that case, I feel like everyone requires it, but it really comes down to on how you want to take it for yourself.
Zee, it's been absolutely fascinating hearing you speak, and thanks very much for giving us all those contributions. I do hope that people at home can hear you clearly, because I know somebody, next door neighbour maybe, was doing a bit of lawn mowing, and I'll try and filter it out in the edit, but hopefully we got to hear everything that you had to say. And thanks again for joining us, Zee.
No, thank you so much for having me, John. And yeah, there was a lawnmower that was mowing the lawn. My neighbor was doing it, and it gets annoying at times. But I hope the audio is clear and everything goes well through. I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for having me on your show. And I look forward to connecting with you again.
Cheers. See you next time.